Okay, this is going to be a video on a complete overhaul of a 650R, starting with putting it together. If you want to know how to take them apart, you can watch this video in reverse. So what we're going to be doing first off is putting on a brand new tensioner slide along with the bolts. So if you look right here, this is the post that this bolts onto. And this is the original style of bolts that came on it. That is the toughest Loctite in the world. You will break that bolt if you try to just pull it off like I did. So I had to tap or drill and tap that, unfortunately. So heads up on that, you got to heat them up before you take them off. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a little bit of Loctite on this new bolt I've got. And it's red Loctite, so a drop will do you. If you can get the bottle unjammed. Yeah, I know, right? Damn thing. That's fine. These things lock up on me all the time. There we go. Okay. So a drop will do you. Seriously? I know. No, this video's going great so far. I already feel my subscribers disappearing. Okay. So, let's see if this goes okay this time. There we go. So just about that much. So what we're going to do is take our tensioner and slide it up. The port it goes in. Sometimes they slide up, sometimes they actually, there we go, they drop down. So the way we're going to do this is there's a brass washer on it, followed by a collar, followed by the tensioner. Okay. And when you tighten this, about 9 foot-pounds is what you need, and it should wobble freely. Okay, so that's step one. Step two is the actual cam chain. Most people would take the old chain and slap it back on. That's not how we roll in my shop. Brand new $80 cam chain, stock factory Honda. So, the way this goes on is you need to have the cam chain first on the bottom sprocket. The bottom sprockets, and that's just an example of how it fits on, but this only fits on one way. There's one specific tooth that will allow it to slide on. There it is. So, the way you do it is drop this chain down. And before we hook it on the sprocket, we're going to take our oil pump cylinder and pop it through, and that's going to retain the chain in case it tries to drop back down in there. So, find the sweet spot where you can work with this. It'll be fairly difficult. Now that we've got that on the sprocket, we can push it in, and it shouldn't go anywhere. So as you can see, there it is. So the next step after that is getting on the primary drive gear. This is what that is. The long shaft side, just like the sprocket, goes in first. And just like before, there's only one way that this tooth will fit.
Is that a new one too?
Oh no, you don't. The gears are non-wear items. So you just do the sprockets and chain. It's too bad this. There it is. It's too bad that bigger tooth is so finicky for which one it goes on. So one thing you can try doing now that you've got that on there is thread the bolt and the nut on just a little bit, and make sure your crank will rotate a little bit without catching on anything, just like it does. Now, in the world of motorcycle mechanics, there's not much place for an impact gun, but the things you can't hold on to sturdily enough, such as this, I make exceptions. So all I have is a Craftsman impact gun. It's already set on forward drive low. the way to do it is to hold on to the gear. Make sure you don't have your thumb in any pinch points or anything. That's all you need. So, that part of the assembly is on. Now for the clutch basket. The clutch basket has a few different parts to it. First off is this large collar. This is just a centering collar that centers the large clutch basket shaft onto the output shaft. So, the flanged side goes in first, followed by the clutch basket. It should pop on without much of an issue. And then there's two washers before you put the bolt or put the nut back on. So there's a skinny washer and a thick one. The thick one says outside. So that outside not only is the outside washer, but with the words faces out towards the mechanic. Followed by a retainer nut. Now, unlike the crank and the gears on that, the flange on this side faces out, and I'll show you why later. Okay, so I believe it's a different socket, but we're going to do the impact gun thing again. And if you get close, you can see in the shaft there's a dent, and on the outside of this flange there's a bend. Those things need to line up before you're good to go. And then what you do is take a hammer and punch and fold it over, and I'll show you how. So again, impact gun. Okay, now see how the mangled parts and the shaft sleeve, or the shaft groove, line up. That means we're in the right spot. Now what we do is take either a punch, but my favorite actually is a cold chisel, and a very small hammer. What we're going to do is line up the corner of the cold chisel with that groove, and we're going to fold that flange over as best we can, and that's just going to keep it from backing off. Okay, so got our gear, our chain and sprocket, clutch basket. So now the clutch basket face plate. Don't forget, there is this little, I'd call that a sleeve, and it fits over this little round free-moving press that's inside of the shaft. That's what pushes out on the face plates and opens the clutch basket up. So that just fits on, and the center of it should slide neatly into this bearing on the center of the clutch basket plate. Now for the springs and bolts. If you have an uncorked 650, you need to be running Recluse springs or factory Honda springs that are 10% over stiffened, which is what I have here. Start them with your fingers and then progressively wind them in with a small ratchet and socket. It should be 10s. Yep. So wind 1/3 of the way in, the opposite one. It's just like tightening lug nuts, right, Darian?
Sort of.
More or less. Start technique or opposing
pattern.
pattern.
Yeah, but with that it's different. You do all the way down.
Yeah. This is a little different, the fact that it has springs on it, so you can't exactly wind them all the way down the first go. But as you can see, I'm just being evenly progressive with it.
It's like that with manual locking hubs. When we take them and rebuild them.
Yeah.
You gotta do them a little bit at a time.
You still gotta help me fix my truck, by the way.
What's wrong with it now? Oh, the whole shutting off with the AC on?
Yeah. Okay, anyway, back to my clutch basket. Damn truck, anyway. So these bolts do not have Loctite. The reason is they're steel bolts into an aluminum basket. If you Loctite them, you will break them next time you need to get them out. Steel locks into aluminum just fine, take my word for it.
The guys who had my bike before you.
So, again, about 7 to 9 foot-pounds These ones actually might be about 12, but I'm giving them a nice stiff crank anyways. Anyway, so I went in the star pattern there. Next you want to go in a circular pattern, followed by the opposing circular pattern. Okay, complete clutch basket assembly, there it is. Now for the side cover, if I'm not forgetting anything. So, first thing you need to make sure of are all the dowels. There should be, depending on how big this cover is, 2 or 3. So there's 2 dowels on the opposing corners. There's 2 dowels with O-rings, which are part of the fuel or oil pump assembly. There's a miniature dowel, which is also part of an oil port, and then you got your retainment shaft, which I showed you guys earlier. So we take our brand new gasket, Honda gaskets only, please. Please and thank you. If you buy Athena gaskets, you're going to be in it again. Take my word on that. So, take our gasket, figure out which way faces out, in which case I got it right the first time, somehow. And the general rule with a paper gasket is, if it's on the side leaning down, it goes on the cover first. If it's on the side facing up, it goes on the bike first. So now, we take our actual case cover, and before I put this on, I'm going to give it a quick spritz of air to make sure I don't have any dust on it, which, by the way, I did with all those parts before we started this video. And that is probably for obvious reasons. So, this should not have any issues sliding on. Just make sure you're square when pushing it on. Make sure your dowels line up.
Yeah, not very square.
And if you have any issues, don't be afraid to stop and start over. It's not worth risking screwing up expensive motorcycle parts. So, you should be able to press this almost all the way on with your fingers before actually using a wrench on those bolts. So I'm going to have to do a quick removal of a couple bolts here. The bolts that are on the dowels seem to be hanging up, and that's okay. The more holes there are in the case covers, the harder they are to get on. So this small dowel seems to also be hanging up. I'm going to put it in the cover first. Like I said, folks, trial and error. Just don't break your gasket, don't bend anything, don't force anything. Take your time.
Seems to be the motto for just your bikes.
For what?
Just your bikes.
For just my bike. Yeah. Because I'm the only one with an assembly difficulty. So as you can see, this is slid on almost all the way with not too many problems. Now we're going to very carefully, before we put those other bolts in that we're hanging up, we're going to carefully thread in a few opposing bolts to make sure this is going to thread in without any issues. Or press on, I should say. So 2 opposing bolts on each corner, that means 4. Just to make sure this is going to go on.
Oh.
See, that's why I say go slow. What that was the dowel catching the corner of the case hole, and it slipped in. You want to oil your dowels first. I choose not to because it tends to make them stick in that aluminum really bad when you try to get into them again.
It's a suction.
Mostly it's the classic steel cease, which is steel on aluminum. And I had troubles on my stator cover side and actually seized one of those collars into the case. So I actually had to do a lot of work very gently with a lot of big easy outs, the square ones, to get that thing out of there. And no, it wasn't my fault either. That was previous owner who did a gasket. What we're going to say anyway. So, I wish I knew how to edit stuff like that out. So, don't mix up your bolt lengths. They should be pretty obvious which ones go where. If it's too long, it'll bottom out. Just make sure you don't force anything. But ultimately, they should all be sticking out about 3/8 of an inch. And it does take a little guess and check, but like I say, just like anything else, once you get it right, it's pretty obvious. So that one went on without bottoming out. This one's pretty obvious where it goes. It's super long.
I think that's the short one.
Shut up. And then here's another long one. Those are pretty obvious. Like I say, about 3/8 of an inch, maybe a little bit more, is what they should be sticking out before they're pressed on. Or wound in, I should say. As we go around the circle, we'll find some that fit better than others. Like this one. And once you get most of them figured out, it's just process of elimination. So I have two that are the same and one that's shorter. The short one, whichever place it sticks out the longest. Which is there, where it should go. These stick out a little too long. That one's pretty good there. And like I say with the guess and check thing, sometimes it'll take you more than one try, and you'll have to back some out until you find it. So that one's good. This one is a little... well, that one might be right. There it is. Okay, so now we go in a star pattern, anything case related. And I go, in big cases like this, I go 2 at a time. So 2 on one side, 2 on the opposing side. And once I get a good solid 8 of them that are opposed and tight, then I just go around in a circle. Don't forget anything that's a stud like that. Don't forget to apply the proper washer to it. Or the nut, I should say. And that's a 10, so we'll do that last. So now we go around in a circle, 7 foot-pounds per nut. Make sure you're not hitting anything that's not the actual case cover. Okay, after you've got that, you can check everything case cover related.
You just skip the nut for.
Clutch basket plate, because it's a 10 millimeter and I've got an 8 on. Okay. So yeah, that nut, I'm hoping that'll seal okay. It looks like a brass coating on it, but it might have had a copper washer. I'm pretty sure it didn't. It should be fine.
Pretty sure.
I mean, if it leaks, you throw a copper washer on it. It's okay. Okay, so that one, since it's a 10, should be about 12 foot-pounds. Okay, now we're going to move on to the fun stuff. As you can see, I've taken my stock compression piston. Sure it's all cleaned off. I've arranged my rings like you saw in one of my other maintenance videos. So opposingly, the top ring faces towards the exhaust valves, second ring faces towards the intake. The space ring between the two oil wipers faces towards the exhaust, or excuse me, towards the intake, and then the two spacer rings on either side of that oil wiper ring face at about 120 degrees forward towards the exhaust. So, the thing I will...
Tell them why not to line up the gaps.
Yeah, if you line them up, you'll get blow by real bad, real easy. Black compression, it won't start, all kinds of crazy stuff.
That's how you break your bike?
Yeah. Well, I've never done that, thank God. But so
Same
just
thing on cars.
just be in this neighborhood and I'll be on the other side.
Can I take the head with you?
That's the cylinder, and no, not yet. Okay. So what we have is our connecting rod. This connecting rod is what I'm going to bolt the piston onto. A lot of people prefer to do, or to slide the piston into the cylinder first and then slide it down. I don't really like that. I like doing it this way. It's probably a preference thing. So what we've got, which is very important with new pistons and rings, is break-in oil. So you can buy break-in oil, or you can do what I do and make your own. Mine actually works better than store-bought stuff. And my secret mixture is basically that Lucas Oil stabilizer, which is sitting on the floor right there. That big jug there. And then a few squeezes from a tube of suspension grease with moly in it. So heat resistance, slippery grease, which makes everything stick. And then that oil makes it real slick. So, just a little 1-inch paintbrush, make sure it's brand new. Just go around the rings and then down the skirts. Don't put any on the wrist pin, because break-in oil needs to leave fairly quickly. The wrist pin is not one of the areas it will leave very quickly.
I didn't get you a sponge. That shit would not have worked.
Nah. Yeah, like I say, I need a brush. Okay, so you'll see on the top of my piston, there's little grooves carved in for valve clearance. The grooves that are bigger face towards the intake side, or backwards. Okay, don't forget that. So, take our piston and make sure you have a towel, a new one, bundled up in your crank area. And basically, we slide our wrist pin through the connecting rod, and then we take, after you wipe your hands off, you take what's called the retaining clip, which I'll show you after I get a little screwdriver here to drive it in. And there's some technique that goes along with this, so I'll have the cameraman come around to my side real quick. Thank you. So, retaining clips for the wrist pin. If you only take one out, you only need to put one back in. As soon as they leave the inside of that little groove, you need a new one. Otherwise, you'll lose it. And this is actually the reason I have a rag stuffed down in here. So if I drop this, it won't be a pain to dig it back out, because I have done that before. I drop stuff down in there and have to dig it out. So the technique is get down where your face is level with the clip you're working with. Start with one corner and work it in all the way around if you can. And these things are a super pain, so if you fail a couple times, it's fairly normal. There is a little groove. You can line one corner up in first. You ever done these before?
Yeah, normally they have the tabs with the holes on them.
Yeah, this is a little different.
We call them Jesus clips because you end up saying Jesus a lot. What the hell? Why does it do this to us? Yeah, those ones are a lot easier.
So yeah, so you start one corner and work it around in a circle, and there it is. Now the open space needs to face sideways. In other words, forwards or backwards on the motorcycle reference. So, poke the corner you started in this little hole. You can back off, it's fine, they know what I'm talking about. And you can press it upwards until that gap is facing sideways or up. As we could say, as you can see, it's facing forward sideways. So that's perfect. And now you'll see I wiped a little break-in grease off my fingers, so I'll reapply a little bit of that. Just in the place where I was grabbing it. I don't know if you guys can see how stringy this stuff is, but it's really nice stuff. That's why I make my own. Okay, so now you want to make sure your rings are all centered. We're going to come back over to the other side and do the cylinder. So our cylinder, as you can see, is this portion here. The best way to do a cylinder is there are dowels that line it up. A lot of people worry about the cam chain falling down in there. Don't worry too much. You can grab it with your fingers, no problem. So just let it fall down, get it out of the way. And then the thing that people confuse is whether to start with the dowels on the cylinder or on the case. Start on the case, and don't forget your gasket. So we have a base gasket is what this one's called. Don't cut it in half with a razor blade.
You ever done that?
No, I never have.
Thought you'll admit on camera, or?
No, I seriously never have, though.
You know, I can't say I have either.
Oh, you've never broken a gasket? I've broken them when they're brand new. You know, when you're trying to work with them and you accidentally tear them. You're like, damn it, $30 gasket.
Nah.
But anyway.
On the truck, I put the valve cover gasket on.
Oh, on your Nissan.
Yeah, it was a long day. Didn't put it in the valve cover, just left it on the block. And then tightened everything down and it had screwed it. So. Nice. Yeah, it was fun. Fun times.
So I guess the simplest way to say this is you should be starting with 0 dowels, either head side or base side in your cylinder. None of them at all. Should be an empty cylinder. So what you do, take a brand new rag like I have, semi brand new. Make sure any elderly or residual oil is out of the cylinder because we're going to bathe it in a little more break-in oil. You will want to have a rag on your lap while doing this.
Okay, you don't need one.
My mom's going to kill me if I ruin these shorts. Okay, so.
Is that why you buy your white shirts in bulk?
Yeah, exactly, Walmart. So, you want to bathe the first bottom half of this cylinder with break-in oil. If your cylinder is shiny or you can't see the cross hatches anymore, take it to your local shop and have them hone it, which is putting those scratches in there. This is a Nicosil cylinder, so that hone does not go away, thank God. So, now we can slide this cylinder between the dowels and lower it onto our piston. Make sure all the studs are lined up. So what you'll have to do is lower it to the first ring. Make sure your hands are decently clean. Most people use a ring compressor.
Mm-hmm.
I usually don't. I just slide it together.
You like to make things hard.
No, well, with the Honda clearances, it's really nice. It's actually a lot easier to do than you might think.
Fair enough. Try rebuilding your motor in 350 with Chev.
Oh yeah, those are a pain.
And doing it without a ring compressor.
You got stuck at tech without a compressor, huh?
Mm.
Looks like one of my spacers between that oil wiper is a little canted, so I'll have to be careful. But ultimately, once these are mostly in, it should just pop in. Unless it's being a real pain, which it is.
Keyword, should.
It should. It's really hard to keep something round, square in your fingers, just by reference. Okay, so while the cameraman stays here, I'm going to go squeeze that other side with my little screwdriver, because I've got one of my spacer rings behind that oil wiper that's hanging me up. I guess should is the key word, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Normally.
Yeah.
Normally.
Yeah, normally this does go a little bit smoother. I'm gonna have to back this off a little bit and actually compress those from the start of that gap.
You know how those tire tools were a good investment? Guess so is a ring compressor. I mean, if you're gonna be doing this a lot.
This thing is just a pain today. Okay. So that should be in a little better position. Again with the should be thing. Yeah. Man, that thing is not having it.
You see what's really fun is having to do pistons from the top.
Oh, just...
Except for we don't pull the head of the piston off, the connecting rod. We just have the whole piston, You drop it down to connect to your crankshaft. You use a ring compressor. You stick it in the cylinder, and then you whack it with a hammer.
Do you have those
dead blow hammer?
Do you have those pneumatic ring compressors, or do you just have the manual ones?
Manual ones. They're not hard.
Yeah, I don't like those compressed air ones. Or I shouldn't say I don't like them. I don't trust them. Okay, so now that corner's started, I can work my way around to the backside, hopefully.
Pneumatic ring compressors, huh?
Yeah.
Never seen those.
Yeah, my grandpa used to have one. They suck.
Rich folks.
Rich folks.
I don't know. I mean, manual ones work just fine. They're kind of a pain sometimes, but do the job.
Yeah. A lot of mechanical manual stuff is just better in general. Speaking of the Jesus clip.
Is it being a problem, or? Oh, no.
A little bit. Like I said earlier, it takes, more often than not, it takes a couple tries. It's just usually at least a little easier than this, usually. So that's in my ring slot, isn't it? Is she taking pictures over there?
Yeah, just of herself. Get on this side.
Send me one.
Nope.
What's that thing?
It seems like once you're the closest is when it's the hardest.
Level it out.
Almost.
Your rock's sideways here. Level it.
No, I know it's sideways, but I'm trying to start on that side, trying to basically rim it in around. This is the rim of that cylinder. The rim of that cylinder has a negative taper on it to help do what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
As you can see, it's helping greatly.
No shit.
Okay, so cameraman had to go home. My GoPro's broken, so I'll just stick with my phone. So, pistons at top dead center. We had to finagle it with our fingers a little bit to slide it in there, but eventually we got it. Brand new head gasket. Easiest way to tell which way it goes on is by this right angle right here. And then this chain slide just pops in and out. That one you don't have to worry too much about. It just pops in and out. There's no bolt inside or anything. My piston's at top dead. And then here's what we got here. My brand new head, brand new exhaust intake valves, new springs, new studs for the exhaust. Ported and polished. I don't know how well you can see it. Anyway. So, I'm going to show you guys how to do this. The best way to do it is let your cam chain slide down in there. Just snag it with one of those little magnets sometime or another. It's fine. Let's see if I can do this without having to set the phone down. Just line up your bolt holes really, really carefully. Just a second. Okay, so it became a two-hand job. What I had to do was make sure the studs were lined up, or I shouldn't say the studs, what the heck am I talking about there? Just make sure those little dowels, that's what I was looking for, those little alignment dowels are lined up, should be one on either corner. And had to press down evenly all four sides. And then the thing we're going to do next involves those two little bolts you might have seen holding down my cylinder. Oh, there it is. So what we're going to do is loosen these back up so that we can get evenly spaced torque on the head bolts. And there's something I gotta show you with the head bolts that's actually pretty important after I do this. Okay, so I got my washer set down, the studs poke through evenly, this is set down nice and flat. The thing you need to do, remember this break-in oil we talked about? Some of this needs to go on the washer and on the stud threads, so that when you torque them down, you're not getting a false reading from either friction or turning of the studs, which is not supposed to happen. We're just going to dab these with a little bit of oil. Just break-in oil. Okay, so we got these all slimed up. I got my flanged head bolts on there. We're all good to go. So the next thing I'm going to do is torque these down. The specs say 49 foot-pounds. I have kind of an old torque wrench, so what I'm going to do is set it to 51. But I'll have to do this off camera, but I'll explain it to you. So you go just like tightening lug nuts in a cross fashion. So start here and there, and then here to there. And what that does is torque it down evenly and nice and flat and level. And really the best way to do it is to start with a little 1/4-inch ratchet and work your way around until you can feel with your hands, 15 foot-pounds. Then you take your torque wrench and set it to probably about 25. 25, 25, 25, 25. And then you go in the exact opposite order. 30, 30, 30, 30. 35, 35, 35, 35, 40, 40, 40, 40, until you get to 49 foot-pounds. It's going to take about 20 minutes, but it is time well spent, to say the very least. So just take my word on it. It's time well spent. Just do it. Just do it right the first time, because it really sucks having to get back in there just for a head gasket. So I'll go ahead and do that, and then I'll get back to you. Okay, so we got our head bolted on to 49 foot-pounds all around. Now for the cam. So what we're going to do is take a little bit of that break-in oil I mentioned earlier, the stuff I made. I'm going to wipe it on the bearing slots. Preferably not in this groove that I got it in, so I'll have to wipe that off. We're going to get our cam chain down nice and deep. As a matter of fact, after a minute here, I'm going to pour some on it. This is all just break-in oil. So now, we're ready to drop in our cam. The best way to do it is to take the first bearing off, slide the cam through, and drop it down into the other slot. If you take the other bearing off after you've got the cam positioned, if you can get it off, that makes it so you can drop the other end down and pop this bearing on. Nice slick break-in oil. You know what? I might just slide this through first, see if it'll fit. Yep, sure enough. Okay. Okay, so that cam is in. I mentioned before my engine is at top dead center, and my cam top sprocket is actually timed. So I'll show you what it looks like. There are two lines that face laterally, horizontally, with the top of the head that are on the sprocket. So you see one down here, one down here. There's one, that first notch says EX, that points towards the exhaust. So it's at top dead center, the sprocket is timed, now to link the cam in. So the lobes face down on this Unicam engine. So, got the lobes facing down. I'm going to take my red Loctite, put a drop on each one of these little bolts. My leg looks like I'm bleeding. Okay. I'm going to screw it down just until it's finger snug with the Allen wrench. Turn this over. I have the spark plug out of it, so it makes it easier. Remember what I said about red Loctite. Drop will do you. By the way, don't drop these down in your cam chain well, because that always sucks to dig them out. When Darian was filming, I dropped to one of the circles. Okay, so we've got our camshaft in, properly timed. Got our gasket maker laid all out. This is, in case you guys want to know what it is, I've used it so many times in the past, and it's about the best thing you can buy. It's really nice. So, what we have now, I took my break-in oil, and I coated my camshaft all over, and I coated the rockers on the inside of the cam cover. I've still got some blue gasket maker that'll work on scraping off later. But one tip for you guys, the best way to do it is the alignment holes are a lot tighter in the cam cover than they are in the head. So start your dowels actually in the cam cover. So now what we're going to do is hopefully pop it on with relatively little difficulty. Okay. Aligned. That's two aligned. Okay. So that's all popped on there. Now we can start threading in a couple of bolts. First two. Okay, so here's what we got now. We got our cam cover on, got all our bolts torqued in a star fashion to 9 foot-pounds. These two on top torqued to 13. And then these here, you'll know which ones go in this quadrilateral set here because they'll have the copper washers on them. These two just torqued to 9, these torqued to 13. Everything else is torqued to 9. So, there it is. So the last thing we'll have to do, other than check the valves, is put the valve covers on. Use our chassis mount for the head of the engine. Bolt it to the frame of the motorcycle from the top, and then just start putting the chassis back together, and it should be all done and said and done. So there it is, folks. Rebuilt 650R, ported head. High lift cam, all that good stuff.